So I'm starting to see some questions pop in, and as you guys can kind of see on your screen, we're going to get away from the video side of some things, and that way we're not distracted as much by the video, but we can get into some questions. Let me give you a few of the first ones, and we'll get started here right out of the gate. And I think this is a great first question. You know, do regulators allow doctors to outsource compliance? Dr. Munsterman, if you don't mind, can we start with you here? And I think this is probably a good question to start with you. And if not, please feel free to redirect. But if in fact someone is using an outsourced compliance company or service, is that okay with regulators?
Yeah, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, within the OIG guidelines, they speak directly to that when they talk about making sure that you have a designated compliance officer. And they understand that for small practices, small healthcare facilities, that it doesn't make sense to think that you can hire somebody that has either the background as a compliance officer, and it takes a business and a legislative somewhat background and understanding the law and understanding coding and billing and all of those, and clinical care side of the equation. They get that. And so what they've said is that, hey, if you can support bringing somebody in, or, have somebody that's trained within a practice, good for you, but they don't expect that. And so they allow that provision for compliance to be outsourced. And so it is well recognized, Dr. Steve.
Yeah, so I think that's a great point. As we look here, and I take a look, and you heard me touch on this a little bit earlier. When you take just a look at the business model of the different types of practices that are out there, and you take a look at the medical model again, where you have that consolidation where people are splitting costs, they can afford to have a dedicated compliance officer, and they have those oftentimes. But for chiropractic to remain pure in what it's bringing and that kind of unique nature, that one-on-one, that personal touch that is so very unique to chiropractic, you're not going to see nearly as much consolidation. And so we have to have ways to make sure that we're protected. We can still share those costs. And again, as you heard everyone focus on today, is get you back to focusing on patients. I am wondering this. Let's say, we know it's going to take them about 20 hours a month on their own, and that's if they kind of know what's going on. But let's assume that they decide to partner with us here at ChiroArmor. What kind of a time commitment, Dr. Munsterman, do you see the average practice having to make on a monthly basis, kind of with us leading the way and them riding shotgun? What kind of a time commitment do you see the average practice needing to make?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And so there's two parts to that question. First part is getting onboarded. And so what we do is we meet weekly with clients. It's about 1 to 2 hours a week. Typically, there's what we call a compliance liaison that's designated within the practice. Now, sometimes it's the doctor that wants that hands-on knowledge directly with us. But most of the time, they'll have an office manager or a designated staff person that I work with, or that we work with specifically to help get their policy tailored. And then, of course, we review it with the doctors and finalize that. That typically will take anywhere from a 5 to an 8 week time period to get that onboarding process. And then once that onboarding process is done, implementing the staff training schedules to help bring everybody up to speed and on board. And then we begin the monitoring and auditing process, which at the end of the day is what the long range ongoing time commitment is on the practice. And that ranges about 1 to 2 hours a month.
Right. So you can see where, from a hands-on perspective, that 1 to 2 hours is vastly different once they're onboarded than the 10, 15, 20 hours, including ongoing training that the average practice would have to do. So you kind of see the benefit there. And I know we're seeing that already. I've got a couple of questions. There's a second part to this question I'm going to come back to here in just a moment, Dr. Munsterman. But there are a couple of questions which I had expected right out of the gate as well, which are about cost and next steps. And so I appreciate those questions. Let's go ahead and dive into them. As you follow the cursor on the screen, I want to encourage you to contact Dr. Avitable. So you see his information up there. Those lines go directly to him. The 888 is a general number. It goes to him. The 919 is his cell phone number. And please feel free to call him, and he'll walk you through that. We're going to do an assessment And from that assessment, we're going to kind of determine what the investment looks like. A smaller practice with one doctor or a couple employees is going to be a little bit different than, say, a larger practice with 5 doctors under their roof. So the price variance is going to be there. However, to give you some frame of reference, because I'm a business person and a consumer, I always want to at least know an answer. What we're looking at is ranges anywhere from, say, $795, $800 on the low end, all the way up to 2 or 3 or 4,000 for larger practices. I will share with you our average practice comes in around $1,000. And so when we look at total cost of outsourcing and you look at investments on an annual basis of 24 or 48 or 70,000 from lost revenue, because for me it's all about time and revenue, then that's where we're going to take a look at your practice and say, all right, here's kind of where we are, here's what we think it's going to cost. And then you have to make a business decision. There's a reason we called this Compliance Reimagined. It's not about scare tactics. It's not about the sky is falling. It's about a business decision. It's funny, I was talking to Dr. Foxworth about this, but I own a very small consulting company. I get to grow businesses, and I'm on the road a lot. And when I come home, I have a lawn person, if you will. They cut my grass, and it's not super expensive. I pay $50 for them to cut my grass. But I know what I generate per hour when I'm doing business. And there's nothing more reassuring than when I've been at work all week and really having great mind-stretching conversations, but great conversations. I'm exhausted. I'll get on my airplane, I fly home, and everything's taken care of for me. I show up and everything's in place. Everything looks clean, and that's a $50 investment, where if I go work for 1 hour or 2 hours, I've paid for my lawn care for a few weeks at a time. And that's the way you need to start to look at it. You need to look at your business. You need to understand what you generate per hour. And Dr. Foxworth has the formula for that, and we'll follow up with some information there. And then you need to talk to us, or we encourage you to talk to us. Need is such a strong word. We encourage you to talk to us so we can see if it makes business sense. And I do promise you this. If it doesn't make business sense, you might find a path where we say, go buy one of the manuals or kind of do it the traditional way, because we're just not quite there. But we want to hold your hand as much as we can and make this easy. And that kind of leads me back to Dr. Munsterman. Let's say that somebody gets audited. And Dr. Conway, I want you to weigh in on this as well afterwards. If somebody gets audited, if I join ChiroArmor and we're dotting I's and crossing T's and I get audited, is your team going to assist me? Will we jump in to assist?
Yeah, and I'll jump in right away to assist that question here, and I'll have Dr. Conway certainly right there. We've had clients join us that typically have already had audits in place or have been audited in the past. And of course, the answer is yes. That's the very first priority that we identify. We do a risk analysis on practices when they first come on board. And the fact of the matter is that there are some that have more vulnerability in the area of documentation, coding, and billing. And of course, that's really big on the radar of OIG, as we all know. And so those are the first things that we begin to pick away at immediately. I bring Dr. Conway in, especially in the event that it looks like there could be some issues. And Dr. Conway, maybe I'll just pause there and let you jump in on top of that.
No, you're exactly correct. And so there's 2 components to this. There's the part where we can assist with the documentation, all the different information that we're working with, the compliance aspect. If the client wants to hire a different attorney to work with the legal representation, we actually work with that attorney too. So we actually have a client right now that we're in that process. They already have an attorney set up from an audit, but we're able to bring in, because I do a lot of these audit defenses, I understand what they're looking for. We can immediately communicate with that client's attorney and bring a better package, a better protective package for the client that we're working with.
Yeah, right. And I think it's important too, Aaron, just very quickly to establish that there is a dark line, between being represented legally versus where we can bring you up to, Right. And certainly if they would like to become a legal client of Dr. Conway's or have their own, that's great. But we definitely support them in and out of that for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair distinction. I think that most of us who are business savvy enough understand that, look, we're gonna coach, we're gonna hold hands, we're gonna try and take this thing as far as we can. There are some circumstances that go far beyond what any one group can offer, and that's where we've got to go look outside the box. But the next best step is we're used to that piece as well. So as you heard Dr. Conway share, top of the place to kind of pull in some other resources, then that's something that we'll focus on. Bear with us for 1 second. So yeah, so that's something that we'll take a look at for you as well, and help guide that over and above. But as Dr. Munsterman mentioned, there's kind of a hard line where that's drawn, and we'll certainly help as much as we possibly can. But what a wonderful resource to have. Now, if I'm a cash practice, because
can I add one more thing to that last one?
Please.
I think the important part is we're going to help you stay off that radar audit.
Yeah.
That it's a key factor. And because, I know what they're looking for, and so does Dr. Munsterman. So we know what they're looking for. So we come in, we start to do an evaluation of your clinic, and we know where the red flags are that you might not even know are red flags. And so we say, okay, we have to change this, change that, all these different things. I have so many chiropractors that think they're doing this one action thinking I'm way off the radar, and they have no idea they painted the biggest target on their chest, and they have no idea. And so we come in and will really help prepare you for that. And you can't prevent an audit. There's no way you can say you'll never get audited. However, we can look for the things that, and change the things that they're going to look for, make sure you're compliant, all those different things. And if it does come in, you're going to be so much better prepared for any audit. You're almost welcoming them coming in. It's like, go for it. Look at it, because your documentation is going to be in, your coding is going to be in, everything's going to be done correctly so that you can feel comfortable.
I appreciate the clarification, and it's funny because that's what makes us think of the rhino. So for those of you who are wondering why we have the big rhino as kind of the mascot of ChiroArmor, it's not because anyone wants to welcome the audit. It's just more because we're going to prepare for it. And we're going to prepare for it by trying to do the right things in the right way on the front end. And by doing that, you're so much more confident and comfortable if, in fact, somebody does come knock on your door. And I think, Dr. Conway, correct me if I'm wrong, because you've done this way more than most of us can ever think of doing it. But there is something to be said for the effort. So if an auditor has two choices, Clinic A has not tried at all, and Clinic B clearly is trying everything they can, who's going to get the benefit of the doubt in your experience?
Clinic B. And actually, interesting enough with that, Aaron, too, what actually hurts chiropractors more is when they buy these manuals and never use them. As Dr. Munsterman was saying, they're still shrink wrapped on the shelf. The regulators will come in and say, look, you knew you should have known, and you did nothing. So it's actually worse to buy these things and never use them, right? So that actually shows up. But if you do go through the process, it's called mitigation. So they look and say, look, you actually, I'll be at a seminar, and I'll have all these guys raise their hands, and I'm like, okay, how many people are actually doing this? Let's, everyone just be honest here. All these hands are going up. I'm like, all right. So you need to go back to your compliance manual, and you need to put on today's date, I learned this information, and from here forward, here's how I'm going to be doing it. I said, it doesn't exonerate you from the past. That's the past of the past, and you weren't doing it wrong. However, by actually changing and noting it in your manual and saying, I'm doing it correctly here forward, if you do get audited, they're looking, saying, look, this is a good person. This is a person that's trying to do it right, just didn't understand they were doing it wrong in the past. So that's for this thing. That's where we help you with that whole aspect of that.
Right. Yeah, I'm afraid to jump on that one more time. We're gonna be here all night, I'm afraid. Just about anything you read from either the OIG or whether it's from the OCR or Health and Human Services or whatever, when they're talking about compliance, everybody knows that there is no clinic out there that's going to get it perfect. No hospital system is going to get it perfect. But the key is to diligently continue to have a work plan. And that's why we call our compliance program a work plan, because that's what it is. It's a plan of work that needs to get done. And we're working to achieve that culture of compliance and maintain that and monitor and keep up on policy and all of those things. And so that diligent effort is what's expected.
The piece that kind of comes through for me as a subset of this conversation is the passion that both of you have to stay up to date with this, and hence the comment, we could be here all night. It's almost like it's almost like, ooh, we get to talk compliance. And that's that wheelhouse thing we touched on earlier. You certainly want to have the people on your side that are passionate about compliance. And most of the doctors I've worked with over the last 10 years and working with chiropractic, where I've personally worked with thousands of doctors, I can't name more than 10 who said, hey, I wanted to become a chiropractor to worry about compliance. I certainly, the vast majority has the same story. I wanted to help. And whether they went through their own miracle or whether they had that slow introduction in, it was, I want to help patients. And I think that's truly all of the dotting of the I's and crossing of the T's. We're truly just trying to free up more time because we all understand the true impact of chiropractic care and the need for it, certainly in today's world. Let me go ahead and check a couple other questions. I know that there was a question about cash. So let me just back up here because I skipped a few here. And then I'm going to get into some staff turnover if we have a moment for that. But if I'm a cash only practice, truly cash only, and I'm going to say truly out there, and for those of you listening, I want you to underline the word truly, because the more you learn, the more you understand that there are very few true cash practices. But if I'm a truly cash practice, do I need to worry about all these compliance issues?
Yes.
Well, yeah. You're not exonerated from HIPAA or OSHA or the labor law and then Dr. Conway, go ahead, talk about the other things.
Well, cash is basically a payment system. It has really nothing to do with your compliance. If you're compliant or not, you still have to have documentation. I have so many doctors when I'm at these seminars say, well, I'm cash only, so I'm doing this. I'm like, that's not a factor. You still have to have documentation, because if you have, let's say, a malpractice case coming after you, you do something that happens that injures a patient and they're doing malpractice, you say, well, I'm just a cash practice, so I don't have to have documentation. It doesn't work that way. And so a lot of chiropractors are feeling that because if I go cash, I don't have to do the same level of documentation, the same level of compliance. It's just a fallacy. Your office has to be compliant no matter what your payment system that you accept is.
Aaron?
Yeah, please, Dr. Ray.
This is Ray. Having spoken to literally thousands of chiropractors and had that question posed, well, what if I'm a cash practice? I'll usually, well, quite frankly, paint them in a corner, because when I ask the question, tell me what you mean when you say you are a cash practice, and they say, well, everybody pays me at the time of service. And if they have insurance, they can go turn it in. And then when I explain to them, when you're a cash practice, when you collect and how you collect is your business, but your level of documentation, your compliance, and everything else is still in place. You're just not waiting on perhaps payment from the insurance company. And then I want them to understand the next important piece of that. If I am one of your patients and I'm paying you cash and I'm intending on taking my receipt or the information you provide me, so I want to turn it into my insurance company, and it gets denied because it, quote, wasn't medically necessary, guess who the patient's mad at? Yeah. Not at the insurance company. They're mad at the doctor. So being cash certainly may feel like it lessens some of the burdens, but it really doesn't change the equation. And then the other question that I typically will ask, and I can think of probably less than 3 or 4 docs in this situation, when I ask them, you've got cash patients you've been seeing for years. If I'm one of your cash patients and I get involved in an auto accident, do you refer me to another chiropractor? And most all of you probably can answer that question. Well, of course not. I go ahead and take care of them. Or if I'm a cash patient and I get involved in an on-the-job injury, are you going to treat me, or are you going to refer me to someone who does workers' comp? And the reality is we have relationship with our patients, and we typically don't refer them out. We will go ahead and help them with that auto accident or that PI scenario or the workers' comp scenario. So in their mind, this reminds me of the Lysol commercial. I'm 99.9% cash. And what I always wonder about is, well, kind of off subject, but what is that one bug that's the 0.1% that stuff will kill? It just always strikes me as funny, but you know, when doctors say cash practice, they need to understand that cash practice, they really are rare. And as long as they have even 1 foot, 1 toe in the side of third-party reimbursement, they are a mostly cash practice, but they're 99.9%.
Yeah, and I think that's why, you know, I said we got to underline the word truly. I think that there are a lot of doctors who think they're a cash practice, to your point, but that's not how they're operating. And to the earlier point of Dr. Conway and Dr. Munsterman, it doesn't take away the need to certainly prove and document the right way. And as we look at documentation, and as I think about ChiroArmor, you know, when we're going in, are we going to tell them what to do from a documentation, or are we going to help them review that documentation and coach them on how to do it the right way? And so, Dr. Munsterman, from a documentation standpoint, what are 1 or 2 things that we might help them do to further them along this path of compliance, to let them know that they're not alone out there, and help coach them get better?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we know, there are documentation requirements, as you just mentioned, in standards, and Dr. Conway spoke briefly to those. And understanding that, then there is a monitoring and auditing process that comes out of that. And one of the things that we do from the get-go, when we look at the risk analysis side of it initially, is that we do a review and do an audit of episodes of care that docs will send us patient files so that we can review that against the standard. And then we can determine, okay, how vulnerable is this doctor in his current documentation habits? You know, is what changes need to be happening? And yes, we do coach our clients to the point where they have good documentation, and then we still check them. We check them on a quarterly basis because we feel that it's very important to watch and to have that presence, if you will. And it's amazing what changes in a practice. You know, getting busier can make changes. You can have, especially if you have multiple doctor practices with associates, not everybody comes into a practice with the same level of knowledge. I mean, skill levels are different, knowledge levels different. The habit of good documentation, that's exactly what it is. It's a habit of good documentation and understanding the guidelines, understanding the parameters, understanding what you need to cover on an initial visit versus subsequent, being able to demonstrate treatment effectiveness, on and on and on. Well, these are things that we work with to help people understand, clients understand, and then we monitor those processes and work with them and coach them along the way. And so it's not a one and you're done deal, Aaron. I think the docs know that and probably realize that. And we certainly, it's a part of our overall process is to continue to refine and keep them above par in that area.
Yeah, I think we can't stress enough. Our primary goal is to keep them off the radar. And we've said it, it's impossible to keep everybody off the radar. But the primary goal here is to keep as many clinics as we can off the radar. And I think that we all know this. You go to a weekend seminar, you buy the book that we've talked about, you shrink wrap the book, it sits there, and then you get back to life because Monday morning life starts again. But the rules of the game are changing, and so we're trying to figure out a way to give our practices peace of mind. And what we know from so many practices is we give them the tool, but they don't necessarily have the time to do it on their own, right? And so it's that old, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't teach him to drink. And here it's more, we're going to lead you to water, and we're going to drink with you. Let's do this thing together, because honestly, with the schedule, with the expertise, with the passion, you're going to find yourself off the radar in an entirely different way. And let me kind of close with this. We've been on the phone for coming up on an hour, and I know that there are a couple more questions popping in, so I may not quite close yet. But the other piece is we look at, as Dr. Munsterman mentioned, different skill sets, different doctors. If you happen to have on your team a great compliance person and they leave in 6 months, then you have to start from square one. So with ChiroArmor, Dr. Munsterman, if we have that compliance liaison and they leave, will we retrain a new one?
Oh, absolutely. And that's all part of the deal, isn't it? You know, we have staff turnover in our industry, and part of that is because of the business model that we're under for the most part. I don't think anybody would disagree that we're paid differently than other medical colleagues that are out there. And so the fact of the matter is that finding staff is difficult. And of course, that's exactly why we want to make sure that you have this continual resource in front of you and accessible to you, that we're right with you in helping bring people to the level that they need to be within a short time frame. And again, that's exactly why practices need ChiroArmor. I mean, and that's why we're excited to be able to deliver this product.
Absolutely. I've got a couple more pricing questions. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to have Dr. Evitable call everyone on this webinar. This was an invitation-only exclusive event. This is a new product, so it's not as though we're going to thousands of practices. There are under 1,000 practices that we sent the mailer to for the first round, and in part because we as a company have to ensure the level of service that we're providing as well. And so in order to do the hands-on type stuff that we're talking about, there is a volume level that we can work through. So what I'm going to do is have Dr. Evitable reach out to each and every one of you who was on today's webinar. If you're the doctor in the office and your staff's not aware of what's going on, please give your staff a heads up that Dr. Evitable is going to be calling, and we'll get all of your questions answered from a pricing standpoint. And if you personally answer the phone, well, then expect a call from Dr. Evitable, and he should be able to fill in some blanks from a pricing perspective, what it's going to look like for the first 12 or 24 months while we work together, and what it might look like after that. Ultimately, again, as we started today, we want you to reimagine compliance. We want you to feel a lot like what you saw in that brochure with the person in their feet up and just relaxing. What I noticed from the doctors that we have the opportunity to work with, they truly are just so much more relaxed when they're doing it the right way. They're focused on patient care. They're focused on growing their businesses. They're focused on outcomes. They're focused on their community. And at the end of the day, they're focused on what's important to them, whether that be family or free time or just getting kind of their life back. And so that's really what the goal is here. We want you to reimagine compliance. We want you to have a new experience. And we want you to certainly practice with that peace of mind that we're going for. Before I sign off for tonight, I'll start with Dr. Foxworth. Dr. Foxworth, any closing statements or comments you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I think probably the most important thing is, again, after talking with so many doctors, is, well, yeah, I bought a compliance manual, and again, the shrink wrap, you've seen what I've seen, Dr. Munsterman. But, I usually try to explain to doctors that compliance is not an event. It really is a process. It becomes part of your day-to-day operations. And for many of us, at first, compliance feels like such a heavy lift that we simply get back into our routine and don't do it. And the whole focus of putting together ChiroArmor is to help guide you through that process. And let's face it, none of you can name any top athlete in any sport that doesn't have a coach, that doesn't have a guide, that doesn't have someone that's helping them, even the ones that are at the highest level, improve. And I do want to go back to one other question that was answered. When we put this process together, this company, you hit on the rhino. And the reason that we chose that is that, whether you know it or not, the rhino has probably the thickest, toughest skin of any animal on the planet. And that's what we want you to feel like if you're using ChiroArmor. While you may get in and end up mixing it up, if you get an audit or something like that, we want you to know that you've done everything you can to protect yourself, and you're not knowingly and willfully ignoring the rules and regulations. So understand that, this is a relationship. It's not a one and done call that we do. We literally are in a relationship with you to make sure that, well, like you see on some of the game shows, people standing up, yelling and waving their arm and saying, pick me, pick me. The idea is to put you in a position where you can practice, have the peace of mind, and if something goes wrong, with certainty, you're almost in a position, like Dr. Conway said earlier, almost in a position to say, bring it.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful point. And bringing up Dr. Conway, what about you? Any closing messages you might want to share with us?
I want people to understand that we do have a passion for this. It wasn't like I woke up one day and said, hey, I want to be the Medicare guy. No one wants to be that, right? I mean, it's not an exciting thing, but the more I go out and I see how it's actually changing chiropractors' lives, and I'll have people come up after a seminar and just literally hug me because they've been scared to death. They're thinking getting out of Medicare, thinking out of the whole practice of chiropractic because they're just afraid they're going to be audited. And to actually get a hug and just look in my eyes and say, you've made this so I feel I can stay in the profession. And then it's gratifying. And so all of us in this entire company here, our goal is to bring security and prosperity to our profession. And right now, it's not there. And so by doing this one at a time, however it takes us to get it, I'm excited to actually transform the chiropractic profession through compliance so that they can actually achieve even more greatness.
Yeah, I like security and prosperity. I think that's a really strong way to sum this up. And Dr. Munsterman, we'll kind of revert to you to close us out for the night. Any final thoughts from you?
Well, as I was listening to Dr. Conway, I reflected on the writer that said it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. And I think about our profession. I've been in this for over 33 years. I have to add one every year. And I mean, this is the best of times. I mean, you brought up the opioid crisis, Aaron, early on, and just the opportunities that we have available and how everybody is pointing to a non-pharmacological alternative for pain management. Well, guess who's on the front line? And people are pointing to us to be in the front line. And so, I mean, we have great satisfaction survey results. We've got everything going our way. But the fact is that if we don't shore up the business of chiropractic, it's all for nothing. And that's why I'm in it. And I know that's why Dr. Ray and Dr. Steve are in it as well. It's like, holy crap. We've got a profession that is poised to make great strides. And my youngest daughter is midway through chiropractic school right now, and so as I think about, just the future of the profession and think about, her future as well, that gets me up in the morning. And we want to be able to share that with you.
I absolutely love the passion. And so we're spread throughout the country as we're doing today's webinar, and I'm 5 states away, and I think I can feel that passion from here. So I love that answer. Look, I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their evening, not just the folks involved with ChiroArmor, but for those of you who have chosen to log into a special event with really short notice. We're excited about this. This is a unique product. This is a unique service and a unique opportunity. And honestly, it's a unique team. And I couldn't be more excited to have the opportunity to not just lead tonight's event, but really work with this particular team to bring this particular service to market. Such a wealth of knowledge and passion and hearts in the right place to work, and an understanding, because every single person on this call has been in the trenches. So a true understanding of what the calling of chiropractic is, and it isn't documentation or compliance. That's just a byproduct of having to stay in business. So please be on the lookout for some follow-up information, some follow-up phone calls. Tell your colleagues who you think fall in line with understanding kind of the business side of this, but also the practice side of this. We're excited to see what the future holds. We're excited to share more of ChiroArmor with you, but most important, we're excited to help the entire profession experience compliance reimagined. I hope you all have a great night. Have a wonderful holiday season, and we look forward to speaking with you soon.